Some more good news for you this morning. There is even good news about disappointment. In this message series, I want to reframe our perspective on some of the difficulties that we face in life. The gospel, means good news. And it's not just the good news that Jesus saves us from sin, which he does, but that Jesus' kingdom can transform and redeem every part of our life here and now. Even death, even failure, even doubt, even disappointment. Is that good to hear? You're not convincing me. So we often, traditionally, it gets boiled down. The gospel of the kingdom is Jesus came to save us from sin. True, and that's great news. It's not the only news. It's that he is the king of the Father's kingdom. All authority is now his. And you have been brought into that kingdom. What is in that kingdom is yours by birthright. So everything about that kingdom is supposed to impact your life here. That's why when Jesus taught the disciples to pray, he said, pray like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on, specifically, earth, as it is right now in heaven. That's what you've been born again and saved into. You haven't just been saved from something, you've been saved into something. Good news is that this kingdom is accessible now on this fallen, broken, messed up world. And that's what we're looking at, understanding that there's good news even in the worst parts of life. You've got access to something. It's not just a magic ticket to get out of here when you die. It's what can come into your life right here and now. And today when I use the word disappointment, we've got that clicker working there. I think it's on. Move that next slide up. Boom. When I use the word disappointment, today I'm including all the different kinds of grief, loss, letdowns, betrayal, and defeat. So when I use that word today, just include all those things. Grab any bad news you can find and chuck it in there. Has anyone ever experienced any of those things? These are common to all people in every season of history since Genesis chapter 3. If you're breathing, you're eventually going to face disappointments. Some will be small and have little impact on you. You can just move on. But there'll be others that can cripple you if you let them. All our heroes of the faith had to live through disappointment. That's the reality of living in a fallen world. We're not yet in paradise. So pain, brokenness, death, loss are part of the reality of living away from paradise, living here in a sin-infected world. And yet, God is with us and will use us to make a difference here despite the disappointments that we face. One of the reasons why reading the Bible is so important for us is that God shows us the raw details of the lives of our spiritual ancestors and heroes who have gone before us. We get to learn through their experiences, their failures, their doubts, their disappointments. It's all there recorded in black and white. I don't know if they wanted you to read all that. I don't know if they wanted it recorded, but it's there in God's wisdom. So we've got help. So we can see how this plays out. From Adam and Eve, who were the first people to ever experience joy in all its fullness, abundance, goodness, safety and security. That's all they knew for the first 2 chapters in Genesis. That's all they had. It was only good all the time. And then they sin. And suddenly they become the first people to ever experience fear and shame, regret and pain, followed by the anguish and injustice of the murder of their son, Abel. Disappointing. Later, Noah would face the daily disappointed of living in a world the Bible explains was filled with violence, and every thought and imagination, inclination of man's heart was only evil and all the time. And Noah, this righteous man, lived in that age, that time. That's what he had every day. He faced disappointment. Abraham and Sarah, the people given the promise that Israel benefited from, and now all the earth did. Well, they faced the constant disappointment of what? Not being able to have children. Some of you experienced that. But there's a cultural flavour to this one as well. That's kind of what they're living for having a family of sons and daughters that inherit and the legacy and take that on. And year after year, still no children. Just disappointment. Jacob's favourite son, we find out, was mauled to death by animals, apparently. His other sons brought in the evidence of this. It was the father's special robe that was given to Joseph. And they brought it to the father and says, Dad, I'm sorry. He's dead. All that's left is this robe you gave him, and it's torn to shreds and it's covered in blood, and animals taking him. Agony. Meanwhile, though, you read, behind the scenes, his son Joseph actually hadn't died, but instead had been taken captives by his own brothers who wanted to kill him, but then had a bright idea. Let's not kill him, let's sell him and make some money. So they found some slave traders and sold their own brother into slavery, taken to a foreign land. How did Joseph feel? Slightly disappointed. Now he's a slave, he has no identity. What's more, his father's not going to come looking for him because his father thinks he's dead. Moses, although he delivered God's people from centuries of slavery, those people turn on him again and again. At times they would complain about his leadership. Other times they talked about killing him and returning to Egypt where they've been slaves. A terrible way to be treated by the people that Moses had given up his life to serve. David, although anointed by the prophet Samuel in front of his own family, he served King Saul faithfully, being one of Saul's greatest champions. He had to face this weird betrayal of his king. The king loved David, thought he was awesome. Every battle he sent David into, David won him a victory. But the weird thing is, he started to become jealous of David because of his success for him. And so he sends his national army chasing David around the wilderness, around the desert, trying to kill him. His own king that he'd served so faithfully. This is the same David that took out Goliath and saved the whole kingdom of Israel from the Philistine oppression. They would have been made slaves. David was serving him, and yet he turned around and tried to kill him. And for months and years, David's on the run. I think he'd be pretty disappointed about that. Would you like to hear some more stories of disappointment from the Bible? It's full of them. The prophet Jeremiah, called the crying, weeping prophet. Orphan Esther and her life in captivity, being given to some old guy to use. Ruth and Naomi. Man, what a story. If you haven't read that, it's simply called the book of Ruth, and you'll hear their story just starts in complete disappointment. That is that Naomi's husband dies. About 10 years later, the daughter's widowed as well. Not a great start to a story. We can keep on going. The tears of Nehemiah. Jesus' disciples seeing their rabbi and Messiah hanging lifeless on the cross. We don't want to hear stories of disappointment, and yet the Bible's full of them. To be a follower and disciple of Jesus is not to escape disappointment. Until we retire from this earth, we will face loss, we will face disappointments, but we're living on a sin-infected earth, not in the paradise of heaven. There's a timing. That's why your life here is only short. That's actually a good news thing. You know, Adam and Eve, they lived to around 900 years. Oh, that's a lot of disappointment. There's a mercy in having a short time here and forever in the paradise and presence of God. But there's good news about disappointment. In all these stories of reference, we see that God eventually turns things around for their good. Whatever disappointment you face, God can redeem it. That is, he can replace it with good. He can turn it around to bring you blessing. All those people I just mentioned from the Bible saw God take them through disappointment and beyond to the other side onto blessing, fulfillment, and hopes fulfilled. Every one of them that I referenced saw something change in their future, saw a redemption, a turning around. Good news. Do you know people facing pain, loss, grief, disappointment? Do you think it would be good for them to hear about the hope they can find in God who redeems our disappointments? Would it be good for them to hear some of these stories that have painful agony somewhere in the middle of them, but then God brings them through into a place of blessing? You've got good news to share. By his Spirit, we're told he can bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They can become oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. That's the redemptive reality of God. He can take the ashes, the mourning, the despair, and turn it around to bring you about beauty, joy, and praise. He's the only one that can. Those terms are significant, aren't they? Because we're used to a world that has ashes, that has mourning, that has grief. But are we used to one that has beauty, joy, and praise? Well, you've got access to that kingdom. That's the kingdom you've been brought into, and that's the kingdom that you would bring into every situation in the world that you're placed in. That's his Spirit upon you. Wow. The Bible gives us very good news to share. And secondly, with Christ, although we can't avoid disappointment and loss, he can walk us through disappointment and loss. And this is so important to unpack. It's a simple statement and easy to agree with, but you need to unpack it for your journey. We can't avoid this stuff, but he can walk us through it. We want all the things in life that we experience to be good for us, to bring us feelings of happiness, peace, and security. And you're supposed to want those things. In fact, you are designed to enjoy those things forever. That is the whole intention and heart of God for you. But because of that, we experience also confusion and fear when the circumstances of life don't line up with our instinctive desire for happiness, peace, and security. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're longing for. It's an instinct. What happens when it turns out to be loss, disappointment, grief, pain, tragedy? We're expecting one thing, and then we get another. How many parents have seen this expression, this thing happen with infants and toddlers? Here's a little beauty I found. Hey. Oh, the baby's cute too. I mean, everything in life there is perfect, happy, carefree, and fun. We're in the same pants, as it should be. But sometimes when a child first experiences pain, or some kind of injustice, like they're holding their rattle and big brother comes and whoops it away, you'd think that they cry. But when it first happens, often they don't. What happens? They're confused. Huh? They're trying to figure out what they feel and what to do with it. Because it was all feeling good, and now there's another feeling, and they're trying to figure out, what's going on? Is this still fun? Is this supposed to happen? Mum, Dad, aren't you supposed to be protecting me from non-fun things? Aren't you supposed to be looking after me and bringing me good things? What is this feeling I'm feeling? Now later on, the child learns that what they are experiencing is a bad thing or something that they don't want. And then when they face more of those circumstances, you start to see their very immediate response to those things they don't like. They burst into tears. They throw a tantrum. They come running to a parent for justice or for comfort. And even as adults, we're often going through the same process, trying to figure out what we're feeling, what's going on. Some things we just don't understand and we're confused. Some things we've experienced before, and so now we're ready to react straight away. My soul remembers that. I don't like it, and I'm standing against it, or I'm running. Along the way, we grow those feelings and reactions that begin to dominate our lives. What happens when we expect, look for, and work towards peace, comfort, security, and happiness, but then experience loss, grief, pain, and disappointment? What happens inside of you? Our problem is that we're so often trying to find things, activities, events, or achievements to make us happy and safe and valued and prosperous that we start to lose touch with what is happening within us. That is, we're pursuing external things to make us feel good, but we're not really sure what's going on the inside because our focus is external. Now, why is this a problem? Oh, there it goes. Because we're going to begin to live a life in reaction to disappointment. And if you're living from reaction, you're no longer living from purpose. If you're living from avoidance, you're no longer living from wisdom. How many of us have faced a situation that is so disappointing or so painful or so grievous that our future life is lived in reaction to that event? That is, we're now living out of disappointment or resentment or unforgiveness or injustice or in defensiveness. You see the problem? We're no longer living for the calling and purposes of God for our life. We're living in reaction to something in our history. Another way someone has framed it is that we're driving the car forward, but not according to what we can see out of the windscreen, but out of what we're watching in our rear view mirror. The way forward is actually all blurred because our focus is on the past. And that's a dangerous and dysfunctional way of doing life. You wouldn't want to drive a car that way, right? Are you aware when parts of your life are actually being distracted by or lived according to past events rather than God's purposes? Are we aware of that? Are we aware of what's going on? Are we aware of why we make certain decisions, where those decisions actually come from? Because sometimes we're thinking up here in the conscious mind and making decisions so it all makes sense. But often we don't really realize where the motivation comes from, where the reaction comes from, where the need comes from. Are we aware of some of those impacts in our history which turn into something? Sometimes it's explicit, that is, sometimes we're clear, we've made a decision. Sometimes it's not up here, sometimes it's here, where it's less clear. I will never let something like that happen to me again. And that becomes your new purpose. It's a reaction to the past. Or, I will never let go of this. I won't forgive them and I won't forget. Well, that's a new order for your life. And it's a reaction to the past. Or that was so wrong, it felt so terrible. I can never be happy or safe or whole. And that's now your new lens for life, your expectation and your direction. It's a reaction to the past. Some of those things you haven't thought of consciously, but that's sometimes what's going on in the heart, and we're living out of that. Also, when you're living from avoidance, you're no longer living from wisdom. That is, when we're actually just living a life trying to avoid those things we've felt. We're now not living according to God's wisdom. And this is important. When we have a new instinct in operation, we begin scanning the room. We begin scanning people. We begin scanning the calendar. We begin scanning proposals, the future, our life today, tomorrow, and the years ahead. We're scanning to see if there's any new risk of suffering disappointment or loss again. We're scanning to see the risks. Might I feel that again? Aha, I might. All right, I'm not going there. If we think a situation, a plan, or a person might result in disappointment and loss for us, we avoid them. I'd like to go to that event, but I might get rejected or feel alone or get embarrassed, so I won't go. I'd like to get to know those people, but what if they don't like me or want me or understand me? Well, I just won't risk it. I'd like to step out into that area of service or work, but I don't want to risk failing or the pressure of others' expectations. I guess it's better I don't try. Again, you may not have thought it in your head, but what's happening in your heart? Are we living out of that? That's living from avoidance, trying to avoid feelings that you don't like feeling in the past. It's like your soul is haunted by a feeling and you're living in fear of that feeling. And that is a prison. That's the tragic irony. If you're always trying to avoid a feeling, the fear of that feeling holds you captive. You've made yourself a prisoner of your own reaction. If you're always trying to avoid a feeling, the fear of that feeling holds you captive. There's a whole lot of things you can no longer do. You can't venture into them because of the risk of feeling that feeling again. Are we aware of those things from the past, those feelings that our heart and subconscious mind try desperately to avoid? Shame, powerlessness, belittlement, accusation, poverty, rejection, disapproval, disappointment. Is your reaction to that feeling now directing your life or imprisoning your life? Feelings come and go, and feelings aren't bad. Highlight that one. Feelings aren't bad. They're just the nervous system of the soul. Think about the nervous system of the physical body. Are nerves bad? No. Nerves highlight pain. I don't like pain. Are nerves bad? No. They're highlighting something's going on. You've got a nervous system of the soul, like feelings. They highlight something's happening. If you're starting to feel a reaction coming out, you're starting to feel defensive, you're starting to feel anxious, that's a nervous system in the soul saying, hang on, well, something's not right here. The problem is we often attach that to the event that we're in right now or what might come in the future, when sometimes it's something from the past. So when you face some kind of disappointment or loss, pause and consider what is going on inside of you. What is triggered? What is feared? What is troubling you? What is missing? What do you feel? And when else have you felt that before? Don't bury it. Don't avoid it. Don't feed it. Don't reject it. Name it. Pause. Take time. Be still with the Lord. Ask Him for help to name it. What is this I'm feeling? And bring His Word and His Spirit into it. He will help you see where it comes from so you can bring truth into that part of your history and with it, His healing presence. That's a miracle. And this is the process of wisdom. But if you're living from avoidance, you're no longer living from wisdom. You're not bringing God's wisdom into how you're feeling and what you're thinking or what you're planning. Instead, you're living from avoidance. And you'll be captive to that fear and directed by a need to avoid certain risks. Don't chase after nice feelings to avoid the bad feelings. That's often how we get into patterns that are dysfunctional or dangerous or addictive behaviours or escapism. Because we're trying to keep away from some other feelings. So we're trying to pursue something different. Take time to understand what you're feeling and the reaction to the disappointment or whatever it is you're feeling. And that way you can choose God's wisdom rather than being undermined and hijacked by a limiting and damaging pattern of thinking and behaviour. You can choose His way. You can choose to bring Him into it. You can choose to follow Him in it and find that there's truth, there's healing, there's deliverance, there's peace. This is what's so powerful and precious about this point. With Christ, although we can't avoid disappointment and loss, He can walk us through disappointment and loss. The things you feel in your heart, well, you feel them alone. Other people may feel similar things, but no one can feel what you feel. You know you're alone in your soul. Except in Christ, you're not. Amen? Bit of hallelujah going on? Without Him, no one else can enter that place. With Him, finally, someone can know exactly how you feel and share the weight of your heart's grief. Finally, there's someone who isn't just trying to help you from the outside, but from the depths of your very being. Finally, you're not alone. How good is that news? And there's another part to it. You see, Jesus doesn't just feel this with you. He doesn't just know you completely. He is your good shepherd. I love using that term. It puts a metaphor in place, a picture that I can grasp. John 10, this is what He says. He says that there is a thief who comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. That is who is living within you. He's come to be with you, to shepherd you, to lead you, to guide you. And He even will lay His life down for you. Wow. Now, what difference does that make? Everything. The devil is a thief. He comes to take everything good from you, and he does most of his work through lies and deception. That's important to be aware of. Sometimes people fear the attacks of the devil. You don't have much to fear in that realm because he wags his tongue. That's his great ability. Just gets you into a conversation, just promotes some things, just reminds you of some things, just says some things. He works through deception and lies. Here's the thing about disappointment and the devil. The devil will try to get you to react to it or spend your life trying to avoid it. He's just going to keep on highlighting. Oh, watch out for that one. Remember when, better be careful with that person, they're going to probably, I wouldn't try doing that, you might mess up. But there is another scheme at play. The devil tries to convince you that you're alone in it. It's just you, and you don't feel the courage, you don't feel the confidence, you don't feel the ability, you're just feeling, I don't have it. I can't risk it, I can't do it, I don't know if I'm good enough, or whatever it might be. It's the scheme of, I'm actually feeling alone in this, and I don't feel I'm enough. And the devil loves to stir that one. Because the truth is, Christ is with you. You're in Christ. Everything's changed. You've got a good shepherd who wants to lead you every step of the way, and that changes everything. This is what David was saying in Psalm 23, that same David I was talking about before, the one being chased by his own king. He'd served the king so faithfully. He'd battled and risked his life for the king, and now the king has got a whole army chasing after David. And here's David's psalm, Psalm 23. And it says, like in verse 4, even though I walk through the darkest valley. Oh, I thought when we come to Christ that I won't have any more problems or disappointments. He says, even though I walk through the darkest valley. He says, even in the presence of my enemies, the Lord is my shepherd, so I lack nothing. The Lord is my shepherd, so I will not lack. He is all I need. If I've got him, I don't need to worry. Whatever I'm walking through, doesn't matter. He's with me. We might want the Good Shepherd to lead us on the paths away from darkness and risk of grief or opposition. But the good news is that if we trust and follow Jesus, he will keep us on the right paths. He leads us on paths of righteousness. The right path. Why is that good news? Because it's up to you. If it's up to me, we choose a different path. If God's right path for you is going to lead you through a dark valley, and you don't like dark valleys, you're going to pick another path. The problem is that's now the wrong path. It might be a good path, but it's not the right path. The Good Shepherd leads you on the right path. And sometimes that's through the darkest valley. Sometimes that's through the enemy camp. Did you know that David spent time in the enemy camp? Fleeing from Israel, his own kingdom. He went to the kingdom of the Philistines. That's the one that Goliath came from. And he pretended he's a madman, so they didn't quite figure out what he's doing. And then he even began to serve them or pretend to serve them. It was a crazy story. This is that same David. He prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies. That's what my Good Shepherd does. The Good Shepherd is with us to ensure that we stay on the right path according to God's will, plans, and purposes. How many here need that kind of shepherd? How many know that you're prone to jumping onto the wrong path because you're worried about the path? You're worried about what might come. How many here need to find that shepherd? When you come to Jesus and surrender to his lordship, he can fill your spirit and soul with his spirit. There's no one closer. He has perfect knowledge of everything about you and everything you feel. But if you trust him, he will also walk in front of you, guiding you on the right path. Even if it takes you through enemy territory, a dark valley, a place of disappointment, a place that lacks light, that has risk, that has the unknowns, that threatens harm. But look what David says in verse 4, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. David had no fear in the darkness and the unknown or in the disappointment. Why? I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. Or in other words, if you walk through a path at night with Jesus, it's like walking with a battalion of armed soldiers and their tanks. You feel a bit better. In fact, let's go find some darkness. Check out who's with me. Who's going to give me a hard time? I don't care because they're here. And for those people who like this kind of stuff, check out the weapons. Oh my goodness, how exciting. Let's go find some trouble. If he is with you, you feel powerful, not powerless. If you're on your own, though, you're feeling powerless. If he's with you, you feel confident, not insecure. If he's with you, you feel focused on your purpose, not distracted. Come on, let's get on with this. Let's charge through. You feel prepared, not avoiding the dark valley. Can you hear what David is saying now in Psalm 23? Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. Whew. My shepherd's with me. His rod and his staff, they comfort me. Why? Well, because they're going to whack any bear or wolf, lion that comes along. He's going to protect me in the dark valley. If it's the path that God has chosen for you, if it's his wisdom, if it's his calling for you, then you can rest assured that he is with you, and therefore so is his army of heaven. Trust his provision and his protection and his never-failing love. He is good. And there's something else about this good shepherd. Here's what you can look forward to. In verse 2 and 3 it says, he lays me down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes or restores my soul. He leads me on the right path. If you're the sheep and Jesus is the shepherd, what do those statements communicate to you? Meditate on those things. What does this mean? If he's a shepherd, he's with me, leading and guiding, and I'm the sheep. If the path and purpose God has for you leads you through a situation that includes disappointment or loss in the future, and it will at some stage, well, you're not alone. And you're not leading. He is. So you can trust him with the feelings of loss and pain and disappointment that you might have to face. Trust him that when you face those times, they won't be as bad as what you currently fear. Because he will provide for you. That's what green pastures represents to the sheep. In fact, that's kind of all the sheep wants. Bit of water, bit of green grass, please. That's about it. And here David is saying, well, if I'm with the shepherd, he's going to lay me down. Place of peace and abundance in green pastures. He will restore you. That's what still water represents in that psalm. If you suffer pain or loss, your good shepherd is also your healer. He will heal and restore, refreshing the soul. Without him, where will you find healing and restoration? With him, you don't have to worry about it. He leads you beside still waters. He restores your soul. And he will lead you on the right path. It's not the wrong one. You can be confident, not insecure. You can trust his direction. But I can't trust mine. I know if it's his path, I've got nothing to worry about. If it's my path, I'm worried. Because then it really depends on me making everything work. And you know what? Apparently I don't have the full control of all the earth and all the things in life, and I can't make everything go my way. I prefer that he leads me on the right path, and then it's good. So if you're following Jesus, that means seeking his kingdom, his word, his ways rather than yours, and therefore you can rest secure. Righteousness, with Jesus, righteousness, peace, and joy will forever be yours, even if you have to face disappointment and loss on the way through. This is part of the good news, that even if you have to face difficult times, yours is still righteousness, the right thing, peace, and joy. Romans 14:17 says that. That's what his Spirit brings about in you. He is with you. He will provide for you. He'll restore you, healing that which gets broken, and he will lead you through and onwards. But you must choose today and every day whose will, whose purpose, whose leading you are following. What we sometimes do, we do a few sort of mental tricks in our mind with the scriptures, is we try and apply those things to our path. He's going to be and do all that for me on the path I choose. In his grace, he can rescue you from any path. But there is a path that has righteousness, peace, and joy, which really is what you're looking for. So don't ask him to join your path. Surrender, join his path. Trust him to lead. Because when you're trusting him and it's his leadership, and things look dark, things look worrying, you have confidence that you can trust him. He's good. I'll just put a wee note here. Don't co-shepherd with Jesus. Co-shepherding. It sounds very modern and progressive, doesn't it? I co-shepherd with Jesus. No, don't. Why don't you co-shepherd? Because you know when you face that dark valley, when you see that path turn a corner to the unknown, when you see wolves ahead, you're going to take the path and say, wrong path, Jesus, let's go this way. We're co-shepherding. One shepherd, He's good, trust him. Don't take over, don't change it, trust him. All your life, all the circumstances. You will discover in this a whole new depth of God's love, comfort, provision, and revelation. One of the things I find difficult in our beautiful, affluent country, because it is that we can actually do pretty well without God. We can choose some pretty comfortable paths. The result is, though, we miss out on the depths of God's love, comfort, provision, and revelation, because we're just going to take care of ourselves. And that's as good as it gets. But many of you experience this in the dark valley, in the places of loss, disappointment, pain, confusion. You've turned to God and you've found him. And his love has been greater. His peace has been miraculous. His presence has changed everything. There's been hope in the midst of disappointment. He turns things around. And that you can't get anywhere else. You can't find that in a shop or online, some club or in a person. It's only in him. When he leads you through, you trust him, you'll discover his grace at a whole new level. And it'll continue to transform your life and perspective. Amen? Well, this message is a responsive one. That is, what do we do about it? Can I ask you just to bow your heads this morning? And let's do something right now. We ask Jesus, what areas do you not yet trust his leading in? And check, are you aware of some of the feelings your heart tries to avoid? Are your decisions influenced by what you don't want to feel? Something you're hiding from? Are there things you don't want exposed or talked about or opened up to the Holy Spirit's work? What specifically do you need to surrender to Jesus today? Just take a moment and name it. We're just going to just have a minute of silence, and just in that place, ask him. Some of you already know, but I want you to take a moment just to name it.